Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Wake and Take. It's your boy Jason, and we've got some football to talk about today. Yesterday was one of the biggest days in the NFL season, roster cut down day, so every team had to get down to their final 53. So we've got players landing on IR, PUP, NFI, players totally released, and then at the end of the show, we'll talk about some of the notable players making the cut as well. So go ahead, take out your coffee, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. And welcome into the chat, everyone. Scott, Donald, Brooks, Bach, Donald again, Semper, Billy, Liv, Toronto, Best Ball, On Call, Literature, and Dakota. Thank you all for hopping in. And I got to say, I was sitting here before the show, and I got a little chuckle out of this comment from Brooks. He has the McDonald's K-Cup, and it's decent. It's just a decent cup of coffee. I don't know why I thought that was silly, but I appreciated just the aside of it's decent. It's not great. It's not bad. It's just a decent cup of joe. And, sometimes that's all you can ask for. So I hope you guys are enjoying your coffee as we get rocking and rolling into this thing. Good morning to you, Alex and Jamie. Thanks for hopping in. The way I'm thinking today is not too long. I mean, it's kind of hard to have a ton of takes about all these players that got released. I've got a list of some of the bigger players that got cut. But for the most part, my take is going to be the same. So I'm kind of thinking, if you guys want to make this a little bit more of a Q&A episode, maybe towards the end, if you want to start just asking questions in the chat, I'm just going to kind of breeze through some of these updates, and then I can answer some of your questions at the end. For the most part, I mean, the take is just going to be yeah, these players are released, but a lot of them will probably end up back on a practice squad with either the same team or just end up on another team in general. So there's not obviously, you're happy about players that make the cut, really. And the players that got cut, there's some surprised ones, but they'll probably end up on another team and make some impact at some point if they're, a bigger player, or they'll just, like a Louis Rees-Sammet, as we'll talk about in a bit. I'm sure that he'll just end up on the Chiefs practice squad again, as he wasn't really a lock to make the roster to begin with. But anyway, that is kind of how I'm thinking. So if you just want to go ahead and start asking some questions, we'll get to them at the back of the show, but we will, of course, just go through some of the biggest moves from the roster cut down day, just so you're aware. That's kind of what I'm thinking. I'm thinking more today information as opposed to opinions and takes. We have enough of those. We've given takes on a lot of these players and stuff like that, and there's really not a lot to say. Although, go ahead and take the cat out of the bag here. Ryan Flournoy made the cut, ladies and gentlemen. So that's just going to be today's big victory lap, is Ryan Flournoy making the cut. I will say, there are some concerns with that, given that CD Lamb is not technically on the Cowboys 53 yet, but it looks like that there's some players that could, get kind of moved around, not named Ryan Flournoy on the team. So they need 6 wide receivers, and he's number 6 right now. So anyway, let's go ahead and get right on into it. And actually, before we get into it, why don't we actually play an ad break? So before we get into everything, I just want to go ahead and get it out of the way. I have a trivia question for you as we started yesterday. Here we go. What year did the NFL begin using the 53-man roster? When did they decide to make that the standard? The answer coming up right after you hear about the draft kit.
Hey, it's the Podfather. I have great news. The draft kit is live. It is world famous. Why? Because it is the best resource for winning fantasy football championships that exists. There are rankings and cheat sheets for every format you can imagine. We have projections both at the team level and the player level. And wherever you are, you can click on a player, open them up, and see in-depth written analysis about what to expect in fantasy football from that player this year. And then you can click on the team, and you can get even more in-depth analysis, all the drivers of fantasy production, both in a positive and negative direction for that team, including a signature trend. And the graphics are incredible. So these team insights, they give you the team-level projections, the vacated targets, the vacated ARs. And we added a bunch of features. I mean, individual cheat sheets for Theo and Billy and Dario. So you can take your favorite analyst and download their personal draft cheat sheet. And then in the commissioners section, Memphis Young lays out everything you need to know to manage a league. The best minds in the industry contributing analysis. It's certainly not the most inexpensive draft kit on the market, but it is the best. PlayerProfiler.com/draft kit. PlayerProfiler.com/draft kit. Go get it.
Definitely go get that draft kit. But before you get that, you've got to answer this question. What year did the 53-man roster become the standard in the NFL? We have some good guesses here in the chat. 2007, we had the 60s, and Brooks is the closest right now with 90 or 91. The answer was 1993 was the first year that they brought it down to or Willie actually brought it up. I looked at it. It was actually before or higher, or sorry, lower than 53, and they expanded it in 1993, and they've kind of just done some random things around there, kind of with emergency quarterbacks, practice squad, everything like that. But it was 1993. So that's the year we have to thank for roster cutdown day, as that was, again, the big thing. Lots of teams have to get down to their final 53. And those are the players that, are obviously locked onto the roster and going to be the starters for the year. So it starts with the injured reserve. These players also don't really count against the roster. These players aren't necessarily cut, but are injured right now and not necessarily taking up a roster space, so someone else will be there. We already talked about yesterday, like TJ Hawkinson, Nick Chubb. So those players won't be mentioned here. Well, I guess they just were. But A.J. Dillon is kind of the big one here. A.J. Dillon has landed on season-ending IR for a neck injury. Kind of came out of nowhere. Also landing on season-ending IR is Elijah Mitchell, kind of opening the door for Jordan Mason a little bit. But with those two, that's kind of the big injury newses. The big injury newses. A.J. Dillon and Elijah Mitchell ending on season-ending IR. In the A.J. Dillon case, this is really big news for Marshawn Lloyd and especially Josh Jacobs, as Marshawn Lloyd is still not 100%. Now, good news for Marshawn Lloyd managers, he did not end up on PUP or IR or anything like that, even though he had that hamstring injury. So that's obviously what you want to see, but he's still dinged up. So it's still like Josh Jacobs is going to get 100% of the Packers' opportunities, it looks like, with A.J. Dillon landing on season-ending IR. And in the case of Elijah Mitchell, it really just means it's Jordan Mason's season as the backup running back. But again, I just want to say this and make sure everyone keeps this in mind. Do not go too crazy for Jordan Mason. He's going to be fine, I'm sure. He'll get like 10 points a game or something like that. But he really isn't going to have the ceiling that a lot of people are expecting. I still very much expect Deebo Samuel to get worked in out of the backfield if anything happens to Christian McCaffrey, as well as, of course, Isaac Rendo, the new rookie. So he ended up making the roster as well. So I don't think it'll be fully Jordan Mason, but he's still going to be like the next man up. So definitely big news for him. Now, some non-season IR stuff. We have Jonathan Brooks officially landing on PUP, Tyler Higbee officially landing on PUP, Keaton Mitchell officially landing on PUP, and Nyheim Hines remaining on the non-football injury from the jet ski incident that happened last year. These are all players that will return at some point. They all have to miss at least 4 games, but they will be back. So just use this opportunity to try to, if you want any of these players, to go ahead and try to get them now while they're hurt. They will return at some point, especially Jonathan Brooks. I really recommend trying to get him in Dynasty and even in redraft, really, as I do think when he returns, he will be leaned upon heavily as he gets acclimated to the NFL speed. So those are kind of the big injuries, the updates in that realm. A.J. Dillon and Elijah Mitchell are out for the season. Jonathan Brooks, Tyler Higbee, Keaton Mitchell, Nyheim Hines landed on PUP, NFI, what have you. Also a little bit deeper, why not? River Craycraft from Miami also landed on the PUP list for them. Not like the most important thing in the world, but, some of us are in deeper leagues, and he was a little relevant last year, so I figured I would mention him as well. But those are the injured players. Now let's go ahead and get to the part that you guys really care about. The notable fantasy football relevant players that were released. And really, I've just got a long laundry list here. If I have a take, I'll give it. But for the most part, like I said at the top of the show, I think a lot of these players are going to re-sign with their team's practice squad or end up somewhere else. But like 80% of these are probably just going to end up being practice squad players, where a lot of the other people may go to some different teams. Some of them already have. Yeah, these are the players that were released, and I guess I'll give my take if I think a certain one or whatever will end up back on the practice squad or something like that. But for the most part, takes aren't really that important here. I think that these are kind of bottom of the barrel players anyway, but it's still important. Don't give up faith on some of these players yet. But we'll start With the Dallas Cowboys, their most notable fantasy relevant cuts are running backs Malik Davis and Royce Freeman, as well as wide receiver Jalen Cropper, who of course is who ended up making room for Ryan Flournoy. He was kind of the person out there. The big news there is that it was Malik Davis and Royce Freeman, though, from Dallas that were cut, leaving the door open for Deuce Vaughn to be the real backup behind Ezekiel Elliott and the other guy. I always forget a name every episode? Rico Dowdle. That's kind of the three right now. Deuce Vaughn, Rico Dowdle, Ezekiel Elliott are the running backs in Dallas, with Malik Davis and Royce Freeman being released. I could see, maybe one of these ending up back on the practice squad, and probably Jalen Cropper as well, as you just kind of need bodies in that room for the Dallas Cowboys. For the Giants, the next team we'll talk about here, the New York Giants, Isaiah Hodgins was actually released, which kind of was a surprise. But the big one, the huge one that I'm actually shocked with, because he looked good in preseason and at training camp, was Dante Miller. The undrafted free agent rookie, 4.27 speed. Dante Miller was actually released. However, I will say this is one of those cases where he's probably going to end up back on the practice squad, or, bounce around and end up on a team. That kind of speed doesn't go unnoticed around the NFL. So I think Dante Miller will inevitably be fine. And if he can stick around on the practice squad, that would be cool, as, there's still not much ahead of him. It's just Devin Singletary and Tyrone Tracy now in that running back room. So there's still going to be opportunity. But landing on or getting released is not a good start, especially since he kind of looked good. I'm actually a little bit surprised about him getting cut. But Dante Miller and Isaiah Hodgins, the big cuts from New York Giants. Hopefully Dante Miller lands back on the practice squad. I think he will. For the Philadelphia Eagles, the biggest move is going to be Paris Campbell. Paris Campbell was released. This is a guy who's now just been bouncing around, just is not tapping into the talent that he clearly has. I really can't imagine much more comes from Paris Campbell throughout his career. If he can't even make it in this roster, then I don't really know where he goes, because he could barely make it in Indianapolis as well. I don't think this is a practice squad player. I think Paris Campbell's best bets are going to be to try again on another team, which I don't really think that'll happen. I think that this is kind of the end of the story for Paris Campbell. Washington Commanders had two huge cuts. That's the next team we'll talk about here. The Washington Commanders cut both running backs, Michael Wiley and Chris Rodriguez, meaning that it's only Austin Eckler and Brian Robinson right now as the running backs on this roster. That means to me that at least one of these will end up back on practice squad. I'm assuming Michael Wiley, since he's the undrafted free agent rookie. This is, again, a player that I do kind of like. He was really solid at the Senior Bowl, good pass catcher, looked good in preseason as well. So I thought that he'd be the RB3 ahead of Chris Rodriguez. And when I saw Chris Rodriguez was cut, I had a little bit of a victory lap. And then I saw Michael Wiley was also cut. And then I was like, oh, okay, whatever. But Austin Eckler is not, the picture of health at his age. So I could see if an injury happens, one of these getting elevated from the practice squad if they end up on it. And I would assume, probably both actually end up on the practice squad, but I would assume definitely at least Michael Wiley will, given he was an undrafted rookie. And he looked damn good. He really did. I'm actually surprised about that one, but you just got to make cuts. You just got to do it, even if it's tough. We'll move on now to the Chicago Bears, and there's no one really of note for the Bears that got cut. But since, we are all watching Hard Knocks, unfortunately, Austin Reed did get released. I'm sure he'll end up back on the practice squad or something like that. And we'll probably even have some insight into some of these cuts as that episode comes out. That's kind of the big one from Chicago. Not really anything else there. The Lions, we already talked about Donovan Peoples-Jones, but Zonovan Knight, the backup running back, was released. Not too much to take away there, obviously. I mean, like Craig Reynolds and Sion Vaki, the new rookie, kind of both ways player, is there on the depth chart. So I don't really see Zonovan Knight ending up on the practice squad or anything like that. Definitely curious to see what happens with Donovan Peoples-Jones. I mean, if you guys remember, he was pretty decent in Cleveland, and then it was really weird that he got shipped away and then wasn't able to make any noise and then gets released. Honestly, a very shocking move about that one. But Donovan Peoples-Jones, Zonovan Knight, kind of the big Lions releases. The Green Bay Packers, not much really happened there either, but they did release their kicker, Anders Carlson. Well, at least one of the kickers. I'm sure that they've still got a kicker if they're releasing one, but Anders Carlson gets released. If any of you drafted him in Scott Fishbowl, maybe hold on to him in case, he signs with another team, but for the most part, you could probably get rid of him. Moving on now to the Minnesota Vikings. There are actually a few very interesting ones, and we'll start with 3 running backs. They released 3 running backs, which I think is shocking. I think that at least a couple of these will end up back on the practice squad, as it's only Aaron Jones and Ty Chandler right now. So Dwayne McBride, Myles Gaskin, and Kene Nwangwu ended up getting released. I'm curious to see which ones end up back on the practice squad. I mean, maybe Dwayne McBride again, and then Myles Gaskin maybe, since he looked good, and Kene Nwangwu since he's been on the team. So I'm expecting at least one or maybe even all three to end up on the Vikings practice squad, but they did technically release those guys. They also released Matt Corral, who they just signed a couple weeks ago in lieu of the J.J. McCarthy injury. He's just not going to happen. And then Robert Tonyan, the tight end, I think is very interesting given the TJ Hawkinson injury, that they would move on from a tight end, especially one like Robert Tonyan, who has been productive at least once in his career. I know he's had injuries and then hasn't really been able to do anything since, but still Robert Tonyan getting cut by the Vikings despite not having much tight end depth. I thought that was interesting to note. On the Atlanta Falcons, not many players were released, at least of note. As we talked about in yesterday's preseason losers show, my biggest loser really is the Falcons in general. They have no fucking depth. Sorry for my language, but they have no depth on this team. So you shouldn't be shocked for me to say there's no one really of note to be released by these Atlanta Falcons. But the preseason standout running back, the guy that seemed to be the RB3, Carlos Washington Jr., ended up being released. I mean, maybe ends up back on practice squad, but either way, he is gone. Moving to Carolina, they had a big one, Terrace Marshall. Terrace Marshall ends up getting released by the Panthers. I'm sure he'll end up on another team. I doubt he goes to the practice squad. I'm sure another team will want to take a shot on him. Also, Jordan Matthews, who just scored a preseason touchdown as a tight end and was playing with the first team, he ends up getting released. Mike Strachan ends up getting released as well. Just a guy who's kind of been around. I don't know, just threw his name in there. And then Mike Boone. Mike Boone is released as well. He looked decent in the preseason. They need some depth in the running back room, but they are still moving on from Mike Boone in Carolina as well. The New Orleans Saints have released 3 notable players. Samson Nakua, Puka Nakua's brother, who just had that awesome kind of field goal return thing that was almost a touchdown. He ends up getting released. James Robinson ends up getting released as well. Poor guy. That is probably the biggest fall from grace in NFL. Him and Philip Lindsay probably can claim that title. But James Robinson released from the Saints. Honestly, just pour one out for James Robinson. And then Amon-Ra St. Brown, his brother, Equanimous, has been released as well by the New Orleans Saints. Equanimous St. Brown released. That's that in New Orleans. The Buccaneers' biggest release, I would say, is Sterling Shepard. They got released. They got rid of him. Not really much to note. He's at the end of his career anyway and probably wasn't going to make much. But just, he was a notable player at some point, so I just wanted to mention him here. Sterling Shepard has been released. Cardinals. This was shocking. Michael Carter got released after being decent in the preseason. Jonathan Gannon coming out and saying he likes what he sees from him. He didn't have to prove anything in week 3. They end up cutting him. They just get rid of him. So now it is Trey Benson and Amari DiMercado behind James Conner. Good news for Trey Benson for sure. And I don't know what happens with Michael Carter. I'm sure he ends up on another team. Desmond Ridder also gets released, and I'm sure this is another case of him ending up on another team as well. I don't think either of these people will revert to the practice squad. I think Desmond Ridder would be very sad if that were the case. But yeah, Michael Carter, Desmond Ridder released by the Cardinals. In Los Angeles, Zach Evans, the running back, the backup running back, Zach Evans has been released. So it's just Ronnie Rivers and Blake Corum now in Los Angeles, which is probably fine. San Francisco 49ers. The 49ers released a few interesting players, starting with Cody Schrader. This is, again, a player that will probably end up on the practice squad. He was going to be developmental and was undrafted anyway, so don't get too freaked out by that move yet. I'm sure he'll end up on the practice squad. Cameron Latu and Logan Thomas, the backup tight ends, and Eric Saubert. 3 backup tight ends behind George Kittle were released, which I think is very interesting. As well as Robbie Chosen, who they ended up signing this offseason. They have released him as well, who I'm sure just, this is kind of it for his story as well, unfortunately. And yeah, so that is the 49ers, the tight ends. It's interesting, the depth behind George Kittle, how that'll end up being. I thought at least they'd keep one, but they didn't. It's strange. But Cody Schrader, again, I think he'll end up back on the practice squad. Don't get too concerned there. Seattle Seahawks. D. Eskridge and George Holani are kind of the big ones there. D. Eskridge, just because, he plays a role, sometimes you see him. But George Holani, the undrafted rookie running back, they have released him as well. Not that great in the preseason. They've got enough bodies there in that running back room where they can move on from him. He might end up on the practice squad, maybe, given he's a undrafted free agent rookie. But he's out. Buffalo Bills. Two big ones, or three big ones, really. Justin Shorter, who, drafted last year, kind of had some injury concerns and stuff like that, but had, a good enough profile out of Clemson. He's released. Tyrell Shavers, one of the training camp darlings, he's released as well. And unfortunately, Frank Gore Jr. But I think in the case of Frank Gore Jr., he'll end up back on the practice squad. Probably same here for Justin Shorter and Tyrell Shavers. Don't worry about it too much. There were also two other players, Demir Bird and Andy Isabella. Just some of these speedsters that were released. I think that demonstrates that they do want speed on this offense, and it's just going to be Marcus Valdes-Scantling for now, stretching the field. But they'll have somebody, maybe Bird or Isabella will end up on the practice squad just in case. But those are the Bills releasing Shavers, Bird, Shorter, Isabella, and Frank Gore Jr. Frank Gore Jr., I think, is the safest of the bunch to go back to the practice squad. Miami Dolphins released Mike White and Chris Brooks, the rookie, or the 2-year now running back. Chris Brooks with speed. He's been released by the Dolphins. It seems that he is just not going to make any noise. I know that he gained some hype last year, but it seems to be over for him. And then Mike White, just couldn't beat out Skylar Thompson as the backup, and he will be released. New England Patriots. They kind of started this whole thing off with the big splash. Bailey Zappi being released. He could end up back on the practice squad, but I'm not really sure. I think that Bailey Zappi ends up testing the market and seeing what could happen. Also, Kevin Harris, the backup running back. I think he'll probably end up back on the practice squad. The Patriots did like him and all that stuff, but still, Kevin Harris, backup running back, he's released in your deeper leagues. You could probably drop him. And then the kicker, Chad Ryland, in case you had him in Scott Fishbowl or anything like that, figured I would mention him, Chad Ryland. The New York Jets made some noise as well. They released Deion Jackson and Xavier Valladay from their backup running back room, leaving it to just be Breece Hall, Israel Abanikanda, and Braylon Allen. That's a solid enough running back room. Then they also released, believe it or not, the super athletic tight end, Zach Kuntz. He could end up on the practice squad or something. Curious to see what happens with him. We know that we kind of fell in love with his profile last year, but then didn't do anything. Now totally released from the Jets, which is unfortunate. Baltimore Ravens, the next team, they released quarterback turned wide receiver Malik Cunningham, which actually shocked me. I thought that they would just keep him around as, an emergency quarterback. And, like I said, when this position change was announced, generally, I feel like we've seen some success from quarterbacks going to wide receiver just because they kind of understand positioning and defenses and all that stuff. They can get on a good connection with the quarterback, but it seems Malik Cunningham just not really that dude at the end of the day. They also released Russell Gage, who's trying to return from an injury, but just apparently seems to be the end of his career as well. Russell Gage, Malik Cunningham released by the Ravens. For the Bengals, I literally put no one really. I didn't notice really anyone of note from the Cincinnati Bengals, so if I missed someone, feel free to put it. But the Bengals didn't really make too much noise yesterday. The next team we could talk about is the Cleveland Browns. The Cleveland Browns made a splash release with Deontay Foreman, especially with Nick Chubb being on PUP. You would have thought that they'd keep their running back room pretty tight, especially with Deontay Foreman, who has been pretty productive over the last couple seasons in the NFL, but he has been released. He could end up on another team, could end up on practice squad or something like that. I would assume, honestly, another team, or maybe just the Browns. They maybe get some seller's remorse, but either way, he's released. They also went ahead and released two wide receivers, Mike Woods and James Prochet. So, yeah, they're gone. I'm sure Mike Woods will probably end up on the practice squad. Moving on to the Pittsburgh Steelers. They released Kez Watkins, so it kind of seems his story is over. But also Dajan Edwards. Dajan Edwards is another player that I kind of noticed from the Senior Bowl. I think he's interesting to keep an eye on. Dajan Edwards will probably end up on the practice squad. This is another one of those undrafted rookie running backs. Dajan Edwards at the Senior Bowl was the best running back in terms of vision. He had really good patience behind the line of scrimmage and was very good at finding the right hole and following his blockers and stuff like that. I do think he fits well in the system. It's just they have so many running backs that they didn't need him on the active roster. I do expect him to be on the practice squad, and I could see him being elevated if an injury happens, so don't give up on Dajan Edwards quite yet. Houston Texans made a big one with Noah Brown. They released Noah Brown, who was, a kind of a league winner for a lot of people last year. Came in at the right time, had some spike weeks for free for a lot of teams. He's been released by the Texans, shockingly, which kind of shows that their faith in John Mechie is real, which is really good news for John Mechie rosterers. But Noah Brown is out of there, as well as Ben Skoranek. Obviously not the biggest of note, but still, he came from Los Angeles, had some hype at some point in his career. He's being released by the Texans. And rookie running back Jawar Jordan is being released as well, but I would expect him to land on the practice squad. Jawar Jordan and Noah Brown being the kind of big ones there. Moving on to the Indianapolis Colts, Demetric Felton was cut, so that's some news for the running back room. But the real big one here that shocked me was Evan Hull. The Colts released Evan Hull. I could see him land on the practice squad, but this one honestly shocked me, given it's just Jonathan Taylor, Trey Sermon. Evan Hull at least has some pass catching ability, so I figured he was a lock for this roster, even if he'd kind of been disappointing. But no, he is released, maybe back on the practice squad. I'm not quite sure, but he is cut by the Colts. The Jacksonville Jaguars didn't really cut anyone of note, but Denzel Mims, just again, released, just not, all the athleticism in the world, but just not able to capitalize on it. Denzel Mims, again, released. The Tennessee Titans have released Hassan Haskins, the running back. It seemed that he was kind of earning the, grinder role on this offense, given the depth chart release, but no, he's cut. And honestly, it makes sense. He had that off the field issue last year. Has never made any noise now after 2 seasons. Just release him. I get it. It is what it is. And then Kyle Phillips, he's on the release injured list. So it seems he was released for his injury. He just has never been able to stay healthy. Kyle Phillips had that awesome rookie debut and then never did anything again. So probably worth dropping at this point. Probably already was worth dropping. But still, Kyle Phillips released by the Titans. Denver Broncos had 2 huge ones, Samaje Perine and Tim Patrick. Keep note of Samaje Perine. I think that he could, probably go back to Cincinnati even and wreck that backfield a little bit. But he's one that I could see just wrecking any backfield. He's just a player that coaches like and he produces. I understand he doesn't have a ton of athleticism, but it seemed like the Cowboys, for example, could use a Samaje Perine or even just sending him back to Cincinnati just in case they want some depth. But Samaje Perine has been released, and Tim Patrick was released by the Broncos as well, although he has already signed a deal with the Detroit Lions. Tim Patrick is already on the Lions now. It seems that he's on the Lions practice squad, but look for him to potentially be elevated as well. The Tim Patrick released from the Broncos, but already landing in Detroit. Kansas City Chiefs, as mentioned at the beginning of the show, Louis Rees-Zammit has been released, but again, I don't think it's that big of a deal. I do expect him to be able to land on practice squad. I don't think he was ever really going to make the active roster, given the type of project he is, never playing football and all that stuff. So LRZ, don't get upset too much yet. I think it could still happen at some point, at least in terms of maybe kick returning or like a gadget player or something. Obviously, we knew it. Like all of us here knew it. We weren't expecting Louis Rees-Zammit to become a running back in the NFL. We just thought maybe he could do some kick returns or something or be utilized here and there. But we also knew it was going to take some time. So yes, he's being released, but I fully expect him to land on the practice squad. Same case here with Deneric Prince. I don't really think Deneric Prince is going to test the market or anything. I think the Chiefs do still want him. There's just, only so many running back spaces on your roster. You don't really need him there. And he was already on the practice squad last year. May as well just keep him there. Also, Keontae Ingram, Justin Ross, and Irv Smith Jr. were released by the Chiefs. Some interesting ones. Irv Smith Jr., one of note, as he was productive in Minnesota early in his career and then hasn't been able to stay healthy. Bounced from team to team. It seems to be over for him. Keontae Ingram, kind of same thing, now bouncing from team to team, not really getting any juice. And Justin Ross, we kind of hoped he would be able to make some noise, just hasn't given his health. And then, of course, not to bury the lead here, the biggest cut from Kansas City is Kadarius Toney. Yeah, I think we saw it coming, given the signing of Juju Smith-Schuster, given the fact that they were testing him out as a running back. It seemed that they were desperate to figure out ways to get him the ball, to see if they had anything left in the tank. And there just clearly wasn't. They didn't need him on the team. He will be released. And I'm sure that Kadarius Toney will end up on another team. I'm almost positive Kadarius Toney will end up on another team. Probably not for a lot of money. It'll definitely be like a 1-year prove-it deal. But I'm feeling it. You guys might have seen my tweet. We're doing a manifestation here. We're having a Jason gut feeling here. Kadarius Toney. Kadarius Toney is the newest member of the Atlanta Falcons. You heard it here first. Kadarius Toney is going to end up in Atlanta. They need a slot receiver, and I know that Kadarius Toney's not that good, but this is a creative coaching staff. They tried Rondale Moore, who ended up getting injured. Kadarius Toney, I think, could totally be a Rondale Moore placement, and it's probably even a little bit better than Rondale Moore, even if that's, splitting hairs. But that seems like a really fun landing spot to me. Kadarius Toney to Atlanta is the Jason guess. You heard it here first. And Tyler Football, if you're watching, I'm sorry. I've already manifested it. I'm already talking about it. I want it to happen. I think it would be fun. Kadarius Toney kind of sucks, but when he's healthy and has the ball in his hand, he's definitely fun to watch. And I think he'd look great in a Falcons uniform. So I'm curious to see where he ends up. And hopefully it's Atlanta. Two more teams. The Raiders. Jalen Guyton was released, who seemed to be the field stretcher. I'm not sure who it'll be now, but Jalen Guyton was released. And undrafted rookie quarterback Carter Bradley, one of my guys from the Senior Bowl. He'll end up on the practice squad. It's only Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew now. The third quarterback will usually end up on the practice squad. So I'm not giving up on Carter Bradley yet. But he was released. So Carter Bradley probably going to end up on the Raiders practice squad, but he was released. And then the Chargers, last team to talk about here, Cornelius Johnson was released. For those of you that were taking shots on him, hoping that the Michigan ties with Jim Harbaugh would help him make the roster. Not happening. He's off the roster, maybe on the practice squad, I'm sure. Donald Parham was released. That's kind of a surprising one. Donald Parham, has kind of just been there the last few seasons and has actually been pretty productive and honestly pretty decent at football. So he's been released. And the running backs, Elijah Dotson and Isaiah Spiller, have been released, which of course is just great news for Kamani Vidal. As we knew here on Wake and Take, we were never giving up on Kamani Vidal. We said no to the rumors that he was going to be cut. We said, ain't no way. Kamani Vidal's not going to get cut. He just hasn't really been healthy so far. They're not going to get rid of their rookie running back that just led college football in rush yards. Come on, guys. So I know that no one here on Wake and Take was getting freaked out about Kamani Vidal, but it's nice that, everyone's coming back to the Vidal Sassoon. And I'm very excited to see his season for sure. So that's all the big cuts. If I missed anyone, put it in the chat. But I think that was kind of it. That felt like a pretty damn good list. Wish the best for all these players, of course. I'm sure a lot of them will end up on practice squad. And then, we'll kind of go from there. Those are the big releases. So that leads us to some of the notable players that have made the cut. And this, it's hard to name everyone. But so here's some of my favorites, at least. And this is only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 players that I decided to name. So if there's anyone that you're excited about making the team, go ahead and put it in the chat. I might mention them, might not. But a lot of players made the team. So obviously, if there's a player you like and I didn't mention them, they made the roster. But here's some of the standouts that I think was a little bit notable for making the roster. Of course, Ryan Flournoy, we're going to get excited about that. So Ryan Flournoy has made the Dallas 53. Brendan Rice has made the Chargers 53. Kamani Vidal. Dylan Lobby, let's go. Carson Steele. Cam Akers. Tyrone Tracy Jr. Let's go. Those are kind of some of my big standouts. I'm sure there's a ton more. Like Casey Washington in Atlanta, for example. But we kind of knew that would happen with the injury. Malik Washington in Miami. We kind of knew that would happen, right? Like there's some fun ones out there, but those are kind of my notable ones. If there's someone I missed, feel free to let me know. I see in the chat Deuce Vaughn. So that's excited. Pierre Strong. That's pretty cool. Cam Akers. But yes, Bach wants to take another drink. So here we go. Ryan Flournoy. What a take, man. I will continuously talk about my Ryan Flournoy take. I'm so excited for the season. So glad he actually made the roster. And this is only the beginning, ladies and gentlemen. Ryan Flournoy will do more than just be the wide receiver 6 he'll end up as the wide receiver 3 at worst by the end of the year. Get him on your team while you still can, guys. So that is kind of all the stuff you really need to know about the big roster cut deadline. As mentioned, I'm going to go ahead and answer some questions in the chat, but I did want to mention the Wake and Take Invitational. Today is our day where I'm going to go through and cut players off your roster if you're over the roster limit, or if you're breaking any of the other rules. But also, as mentioned at the end of yesterday's show, I started a best ball league. It filled within 2 minutes, so it was really, really fast. So I actually decided to start another one due to popular demand. A lot of people said, hey, I would like to be in another best ball league with you. So I have started Wake and Take Best Ball 2. Again, this is 12 teams, so I need 11 of you to join. If you're in yesterday's best ball tournament, do not join this. And if you're in the Wake and Take Dynasty League, the 32-team Dynasty League, do not join this. The sleeper link has been posted to the YouTube chat. If it does not fill in the show, it'll end up in the YouTube description. But everyone that missed out yesterday that isn't in the Dynasty League or in yesterday's best ball, go ahead and sign up for another one. I've copied the rules from yesterday, so it's going to be the exact same best ball, 12 teams, full PPR, tight end premium, only one quarterback. And we are, of course, doing kick return scoring. Go ahead and join that sleeper league if you want to play some best ball with me. Says it doesn't exist. Okay, hold on. Let me try a different link. Let's see. Try this one. Try that link. Try that link. That is interesting. I think I might have accidentally pressed L instead of enter. But yes, and in case you're wondering, yesterday's best ball draft kicked off basically immediately, and we are zooming. We are already 10 rounds through, and your boy has landed Bijan, Marvin Harrison, Kyle Pitts, Jalen Waddle, CJ Stroud, DeAndre Swift, Rome Odunze, DeAndre Hopkins, Jameson Williams, and Trey Benson. Excited to see how the rest of the draft goes. And excited to now also start this second Wake and Take Best Ball League. Again, guys, do not join if you're in the Dynasty League. Do not join if you're already a part of the other Best Ball League. But if you want to draft with me and you missed out on yesterday's, go ahead and hit that link in the chat for some more Wake and Take League action. So, guys, I'm going to hop into the chat now and answer any questions that you guys may have regarding these cuts. And again, thanks for joining. I love spending my mornings with you guys. It's always a good time. Semper Fi asks, which cut running back will wind up on the Packers? This is a great question. As it is, someone needs to end up there, right? I mean, it can't just be Josh Jacobs and Marshawn Lloyd, like especially with A.J. Dillon on season ending. So I'm sure someone will end up there. I mean, that could probably be that's probably a Samaje Perine sweepstakes team, to be honest, like something like that. Maybe Michael Carter could end up on the Packers. It would be an all-purpose back, I think. Like, I don't think that they would go get maybe Evan Hull could be interesting. Yeah, I think those would be my three choices. Evan Hull, maybe Keontae Ingram too. But Evan Hull, Samaje Perine, and Michael Carter, I think, are kind of the three to keep your eye on there for the Packers, because I do think that they would want themselves a little bit of a all-purpose back. Did Jalen Brooks make the Cowboys roster? Yes. Yes, he did. Jalen Cropper did not, but Jalen Brooks did. Should I trade for Christian Watson in Dynasty? I mean, as it always goes. And by the way, we've already filled up this best ball league, so we might have to do another one tomorrow because this is crazy. You guys are super, super into joining these best ball leagues with me. So thanks, guys, for the support. Happy to get this going. But Christian Watson, should you get him in Dynasty? I would say yes. Obviously, it's going to come down to the price, but I do think that he is in a realm of wide receiver where he's a perfect tier down candidate. If you have, say, a Brandon Ayuk, for example, as someone that I always say that I'm tearing down from, or maybe even Tyreek Hill, like someone that I've been tearing down from just to try to get some extra juice out of that fruit. I think that you could go for Christian Watson, take that upside swing, and then just try to maybe get like a draft pick to close the gap or another player or something like that. But Christian Watson is a fun tier down candidate for me. Which team do I think Kadarius Toney goes to drop balls and create offside penalties? Like I said, Atlanta. He's going to ruin the Falcons. Like I've said all offseason, this whole Falcons, like, it just seems too good to be true. Something's going to wreck it. So why not Kadarius Toney? Yeah, I agree. Keontae Ingram is a good fit for Dallas. I could definitely see Dallas signing one of these running backs. I still don't think it's going to be Rico Dowdle, Zeke Elliott. That just doesn't sound right. Kyren Williams, the next James Robinson. That would be so sad. But he's trending that way. Punt returner now. It's wild. Quick question. In a 10-team keeper league, can only keep one full PPR, one quarterback, non-tight end premium. I could keep Lamb in the first, Mike Evans in the 12th, Chris Olave in the 19th, or Laporta in the 20th. I would go with Olave in the 19th. I think Olave in the 19th is the best value there. That is just so late. You can probably end up just drafting CeeDee Lamb again or just someone else in the first round. So with it not being tight end premium, I don't think you should go after Laporta, who, I mean, obviously 20th round Laporta is amazing. But again, given it's not tight end premium, I'll just take the wide receiver a round earlier and get Chris Olave. Is Juju worth a look in deep dynasty leagues? I would say no. I would say no. That we've seen Juju in Kansas City, and it amounted to nothing. And that was when they didn't have Xavier Worthy, Hollywood Brown, and Rashee Rice had hadn't broken out, right? Like, so I'm not really worried about Juju in Kansas City. I think he's just a body there. Really not that big of a deal. Royce Freeman, Cowboys grabbing Dalvin Cook, maybe. I do think that they get someone. Flournoy or Tolbert by week 5. Week 5 might still be Tolbert. But like week 10, I think, is when I'm kind of feeling Ryan Flournoy. But it could be, I mean, like, you know, the thing with Tolbert is not just the fact that he hasn't really been productive, but also he's been struggled to stay healthy. So, I do think Flournoy will take over sooner rather than later. Buy high on Corum? Depends on the price. I don't know. I still want to see this play out. Right now, he's obviously inflated and Kyren Williams is deflated, but I'm still of the camp that this will be a committee. I think that it's going to be a 60-40 Kyren Corum split. Obviously, if injuries happen, then Corum goes up. But I mean, you know, an injury could happen to Corum too. So I don't want to pay up too much for Corum. But if you could get him for a reasonable price, why not? What do I think about Kyren Williams and his punt returning duties? I'm just going to say this. Do not be surprised when other starters are announced as kick and punt returners, okay? Especially kick returners. This is something that we kind of speculated on when the new rule came out. Bill Belichick started this. He said, I think it was like College Football Game Day. It was like after it was announced he was on College Football Game Day. They asked him about it or something. It was an interview. And basically he asked, you know, what does he think teams will be doing with the new kickoff rules? And he said he thinks that he's just going to that teams will probably start using their bigger players because he thinks size will actually end up being an advantage here. So I wouldn't be surprised to see some starting running backs end up getting this opportunity. Now, with Kyren's case, this is punt returning and not kick returning, which is a little bit more concerning. Lots of injuries happen on that. Hopefully he's just saying that. I mean, like, if he actually does that, I do think that's definitely a concern for sure. Elijah Mitchell out for the season. It sucks. But we're just doing free for these best ball. I'll end up thinking of something, maybe like a nice little participation prize or something. But yeah. Will Dallas sign anyone? I think so at some point. Is Corum being drafted too low? I think he could probably stand to go a round or two earlier. Deontay Foreman sucks. When will the draft begin for the leagues that just started? Well, probably 11 a.m. I'll probably just do it. That 11 a.m. seems like a good start. P. Ryan going to wreck my Chase Brown shares? He's going to wreck somebody's shares. Not wreck them, but he'll just end up on a team that makes you sad, and he will get some usage. Would you do a show about current returners for each team and their values? If those get released, I'm still not sure if teams have actually released who their kick returners are. Like, I really think a lot of teams are keeping it close to their chest for week 1, and then the cat will come out of the bag. And I'm still not even sure every team knows what they're doing. Even I'm sure a lot of teams have a plan for week 1, and then they're going to change it. And that's why I said during our Scott Fishbowl episodes to not draft any known kick returners. Like, sure, it's probably still going to be Rashid Shaheed, but what if it just ends up being Taysom Hill, right? Like, or in Denver, like, sure, it could be Mims. What if it just ends up being like Andrick Estime? Like, I don't know. Like, we don't know. Things are changing. So, like, I don't want to get cute with it. I just don't. Oh, Dalvin Cook did sign with the Cowboys. Okay. So that's awesome. That's awesome news. And definitely add Dalvin Cook. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. It says to the practice squad now, but he'll definitely be elevated at some point. And I'm going to say it. I think Dalvin Cook is more left in the tank than Ezekiel Elliott. Everyone, you all have a fantastic rest of your day, a wonderful Wednesday. Enjoy the rest of your week, and make sure you hit that like button and subscribe, as we'll be back tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern with a very special guest, Alan Says Lowski. Everyone, have a good one. Peace.
From the Podfather to you, I deeply appreciate you tuning in. And many ask, what can I do? What can I do to help support the hosts, the research they do, the production costs? Go to PlayerProfiler.com, Dynasty Deluxe, World Famous Draft Kit, Rankings, DFS Dominator, and of course, data analysis. Subscribe to any one of those, and you support all of us and take Player Profiler to the moon.